Just about finished with the harmony. We ought to wrap this thing up today, so welcome back. I'm going to put something up against the back of the tremolo to protect the paint like I had before. You can use whatever you want. I'm just going to use a piece of tape. What I usually do is double it over so that the sticky sides are together. Slip that under the back edge of the tremolo. It gives me 2 layers and it comes out without sticking. But now what I'll do is detune. When you're detuning a guitar with a tremolo, make sure you start with your higher strings because they're going to break if you don't. If there's much upward movement in your tremolo. I'm looking for these to be loose enough that they're not pulling the neck back toward the body when I try to take it off. But I'm not going to take them off entirely. Then I'll use a capo to hold them on. Excuse me, a capo to hold them on. And then I can take this guitar apart and see my tape's not falling out. Set this aside. Now I can access the truss rod nut. And remember, I had too little relief. When you have too little relief, you want to loosen the truss rod a little bit. And this one's probably a 5 mil. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. I'm not going to go much. I'm probably going to go about 1/8 of a turn. Let's see how that does. And this process is just super tedious. Nothing you can do about it. I've seen some players drill like a hole, an access hole, there near the last pickup, but I've mostly seen that on like older Fenders with a pick guard. It would look horrendous on this guitar if you tried to do that. Okay, try this again. Don't quite have 10 thousandths. I definitely have 7 now. Really close to 8. So 1/8 of a turn, moved it a couple thousandths. So I'm going to go about another 1/8, and the process is the same. I'll detune, capo, remove the back plate, take another 1/8 out of the neck, put it all back together, tune it back up. I don't think anybody wants to watch that, so I'll be back after I do that. Well, honestly, I probably should keep the video rolling there because I nailed the 10 thousandths like right off the bat. So I put another 1/8 of a turn in it, put it all back together. Or sorry, took another 1/8 of a turn out of it, put it all back together, retuned it. When you retune it, your tape will come out, or your whatever you use to protect your body from your bridge will come out easily. And yeah, now it's ready for I'd say probably the nut at this point. I need to finish getting my saddles close to the right action, but I need them a little bit high, higher than normal. So I think what I'll do is set the action to, I don't know, 70 thousandths or something in that range, uh, maybe 80, something a little bit on the high side. Then I'll start adjusting my nut down. And once I finish the nut adjustment, I'll drop the saddles just a little bit more. But the reason I'm doing it that way is just so I don't cut the nut too deep. So I've mentioned before the nut slot files that I use are gauged files. I try to get some that are, I've got a set, and I try to use the one that's just a little bit bigger, a few thousandths to maybe 6 thousandths bigger than the strings that I'm using, because you don't always think you're going to use the same gauge strings over the lifetime of a guitar, and I like the nut to last a little while. I guess if you're a particular player who has a favorite set of strings and you want to cut your nut slot to just like very precise, then you do you. But this is more everyman type work. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to detune, set my string aside. I've already measured this out, so what I do is I'll measure the space under the first fret with a feeler gauge and try to get an idea of how far off the fret the string is. I'm shooting for 20 thousandths here. Usually what I'll do is go 20 thousandths on the bass side or the wound strings, and maybe 18 on the treble side. I don't want to go too deep though, so sometimes I'll stop at 20 if it's starting to scare me a little bit, but I know that this one's quite high already. Just to show you. Hear that rattling? There's a lot of space between the first fret and the string. A lot more than 20 thousandths. And I usually start on the bass side because it cuts more slowly. When you're cutting these, you want to cut down towards the tuner. And if there's an angle to the strings, like there is on this high string, you want to try to sort of finish the slot out so that it moves toward that angle. And that will help the string slide in that slot a little bit better if you're doing tremolo work or, bends or things like that. So there's really not a rule of thumb to this. Now, there are tools you can get that will help you from stopping, or will help stop you from going too deep. And they basically just lay on the fretboard and act as a stop. But I don't have one of those yet. We'll see if I get one day. But I have always done this way, and I've never had a problem. I just do a little bit at a time, put everything back together, check it. Takes longer, but I don't do this for a living. This is a bone nut, so I apologize for the noise, but this nut will last longer than a plastic counterpart. I'll probably do this in fast motion and try to cut the noise down. So this takes several passes. I'm usually a lot more aggressive in the beginning than I am towards the end. So you'll see me sawing away here. That's not typical. I just have a really tall slot here. So what I've done, I've gotten a 24 and a 20 out. I'm just trying to get to the 24 so that I sneak up on this a little bit, but I'm still above the 24. Okay, I've now lowered my action to about 60 thousandths because I'm getting closer on this slot. So my 24 feeler gauge is really close, so I'm going to take it a little bit easier. Well, I've been at this a while. I've snuck up on that perfect 20 thousandths. Basically, I started going a lot slower toward the end, and I went down from a 24 feeler gauge all the way down through 23, 22, 21, and finally 20. So, you know, right now this 20 just barely drags that string, and that's exactly what I want. And yeah, I do have everything kind of messy here. That's what's going to happen. You just basically have to repeat the process all the way down from the 6th string to the 1st, and you want to you know, do the same thing. Move the string out of the way, file it, you know, put it back in, tune it up, check it, detune it, file it, you know, rinse and repeat. So it's a time-consuming process. I won't show the whole thing, but the only thing I will say is, as you go down from the 6th string to the 1st, these files get a lot thinner and they cut a lot faster. So these tiny ones like this, just, even though that's a bone nut, it'll just melt through it. Remember, as you're doing this, you want to check your action at the 12th fret so that it's somewhere in the ballpark of where you want it to be, if not just a little bit high, because you don't want to cut this too deep. That 20 thousandths range over the 1st fret really only works if your bridge is somewhere close to where it should be. So that's that. I'll give you one more tip, which is just if you want to save some time as you're detuning and tuning, count the number of turns you took in and out of your tuner as you do it, and leave a tuner plugged in. And that way, if I take 3 or 4 winds out or turns out of this and then set my string aside, put it back in, I put the same number of turns back in it. It's just a lot faster that way. All right, so I've got the nut completely filed here, and I wanted to talk just a second about action. There isn't much to adjusting action on one of these style bridges. It's just each individual saddle will adjust each individual string. There's 2 screws on every saddle. You want to keep those to roughly level, you know, about the same number of turns in each one of them. And you need a gauge that has some 10 thousandths markers on it, and use that at the 12th fret and eyeball the gauge from the side. And if the string is too high off the 12th fret, then you want to lower the saddle, and you lower the saddle by loosening the screws. And after you do that, tune it back to pitch and then check it again against your gauge. Same thing, if it's too low, you want to raise it, so you tighten the screws and it comes up. And don't forget, after you tighten these screws, tune it back to pitch and check. So it's really, there's not a whole lot to it. You do it on every single string. Find a height that makes you happy. There's usually a rule of thumb on your string action gauge. This one says low E should be 0.059 inches and high E should be 0.049 inches. I've seen them vary quite a bit. I've seen anywhere from about 50 to 70 thousandths on this side and about 40 to 60 thousandths on this side. So anyhow, at this point I'm more or less done with action. One thing I will do, I mentioned these screws here are sticking up pretty high, so I'll just take them over to the grinder and take a little bit off of them. I take the meat off the bottom because remember, you have to adjust from the top. So I'll do that off camera. The only other thing I've got to do really is intonation. And I was just thinking about saying, like, when can you cut these strings off when you're doing a setup on a guitar? Well, you can do it any time. I always wait until this point. I wait until the the strings have the number of wraps that I want on the tuners, the nuts slotted correctly, the neck relief is set, the action is adjusted, the tremolo is floating where it needs to be, and that's about it. There are still a couple of adjustments left to do on the guitar. There is intonation and pickup height. Neither one of those are really going to affect the strings all that much, so I feel comfortable cutting the strings at this point. So that's just when I wait till I do it. But everybody's going to have their own way of taking care of this stuff. Okay, let's do intonation next. Alright, when you're doing intonation, you need a screwdriver. Let's see. That looks like a fairly big one. Yeah. So, check the size that you need according to the head of the screw that's on your bridge, but mine's actually a fairly substantial screw. Basically what we're going to do is tune each string to pitch first. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and put a drop of oil on every nut slot. And also on every saddle. It's just a light machine oil. You can use anything you want. Alright, let's do this again. Alright, so I'm oiled up on both ends. It just helps me make sure that the string doesn't get hung when I'm trying to intonate it. And let's see. So what you want to compare is the fretted 12th note to the harmonic. The harmonic is tuned, usually is when the string is tuned to pitch and the intonation's close. Yep. This one's already on. One thing I did do before I put the saddles back on is just take a note of where the saddles had been scratched by these screws previously, and so I've set them kind of close. That one is the tiniest bit flat, just the tiniest bit. And that one is too, just a tiny bit. Okay, since the A and the D are just the tiniest bit flat, I'm going to adjust this. So, okay, this D string is ever so slightly flat on the fretted note. So when the fretted note is flat, I want to move the saddle toward the nut. So I want to loosen this screw. Not a lot. Retune. Yeah, I may have gone a little bit too much. That's right on the money. Okay, so that's the way intonation works. When your harmonic is in tune and your fretted note is a little bit flat, you want to move the saddle towards the nut. And when it's sharp, you want to move the saddle away from the nut. And again, towards and away. So towards the nut on a Fender style bridge like this, you're moving the saddle that way, means you're loosening the screw. And when you're moving the saddle away from the nut, then you're tightening the screw. For pickup height, you can use a gauge that has a 64th gauge on it, or scale on it, and just eyeball it from the side and see if your pickups are too close or too far away. You can also use an Allen wrench or something similar as a gauge to see if you have the space you want. You generally want to fret the strings near the last fret and check the string height from there. As long as your gauge goes under without a lot of space and without dragging too much, you should be in the ballpark. And then the rest of it you can adjust by ear. If your pickups are too loud, move them away from the strings. If they're too quiet, you can move them back toward the strings. You can do whatever suits your ear. I think I generally tend to set this to sort of a generic spec and then adjust the individual pickups so that there's not one that's dominant. I want them all to be sort of on the same level. So I won't really know if I'm right until I plug this in, but basically this thing's all pretty much set up and ready to go. I've got intonation done. Oh, I guess I'll do the back plates, and that'll probably be the end of the videos. So there's not much to back plates. They go on just like a pick guard. I'll put this on and I'm just checking to make sure that all my screws get decent bite. If I have any that are off, then I'll do my toothpick doweling trick. Those are all good. Alright, last thing I can possibly do is just check to make sure this trim bar is the right trim bar. Yep, that sure looks like the right one. Well, she's all done. I appreciate you guys following me through this series. If you didn't watch the previous videos, be sure to know that there's a playlist for each one of the guitars that I do. If you like the channel, please subscribe, please like the videos, and leave a comment if you feel so inclined. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys on the next project. Oh, I'm getting back to the Epiphone soon. I just wanted to get through this one and get a little bit less frustrated before I got back to the issues I'm seeing on that Epiphone. But back on that horse soon. See you guys next time.